Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today, I'm very pleased to have with me Nadja joining me from South Africa today.
I have a background so I started my career in psychology, moved over into marketing. At that time, about 10 years ago, it was called digital marketing. Now, marketing is inherently digital. And then from the marketing industry, worked in the pharma industry. I also had a stint in education. So I'm giving you this background just to kind of illustrate that I've been or participated in a number of different industries. And then finally found myself come 2017 working as a journalist in the blockchain industry. So what I do currently, I'm the co-founder of Adlunam. Adlunam is a Web3 investment ecosystem. So essentially what we do is we have a whole range of services, support services that we offer to Web3 startups between the seed funding stage all the way up to the public sale.
Now, for you, what did you find the most, you know, and we can go deep dive as much as, time would allow us, of course. But what was, the moment when you were researching that you thought, okay, you know what, really, this is something big. Like what was the main cause that you thought, okay, really, I'm up to something important?
So, yeah, that's a fantastic question. I think in order to answer this, I just have to zoom out a little bit and say that as much as I believe in this technology, because I believe in being really real about things. I mean, if we're going to talk about any particular topic, but especially something that concerns society and all of these different institutions and institutional systems that we're part of, and the future, of course, then it's incredibly important to really present things as they are, as opposed to how we would like them to be or how we think they should be. So just, disclaimer here, um, even though that this technology has or holds immense promise for so many different industries, it does not necessarily mean that we are already seeing it in practice. So I think for me, when I realized, I always say that I'm really lucky, but I say that with a bit of irony, because I think I grew up in the 90s and didn't really know much about what was actually going on in the world. If I compare this to my son, who was growing up in this decade, or he was born in 2006. So for him, he's been confronted with what's happening in the world on a daily basis, like every single day of the year. Um, and so I think not really understanding how much of the world actually was in a state of almost disrepair is something that when I discovered blockchain and I really started looking into the problems that blockchain was solving, I understood so much more about how many problems were out there. So, in some regards, I had this light bulb moment because blockchain or doing the research into blockchain is what shone a light, illuminating how many issues existed in the world that I didn't even know about. And then on the other hand, being from Africa, I'm South African, born and bred here, although I don't live here anymore. But yeah, it's equally amazing and really disheartening and sad to come home every time, because there are so many problems on the continent of Africa, within the country of South Africa. So I was also faced with these issues, even though as a privileged person in society, it didn't necessarily affect me to the same extent as it has other people in the country or on the continent. Um, but because some of the problems that I was already, as much as I could, intimately familiar with, I was also able to recognize that blockchain offers really, really sound opportunities to do things differently for these issues as well.
Trying to promote a sustainable investment practice through an engage to earn model. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I think, first to start off, before I get into exactly how Adlunam addresses the issue, but I think let's first look at the issue and talk about why it's important. Um, if the average person hears the words Bitcoin, Ethereum, I mean, the average person probably doesn't know many more names other than these two, although there is an entire industry with literally thousands of coins and tokens out there, which is both part of the problem and the opportunity, of course. But so the average person, when they think of the word cryptocurrency, they know the word Bitcoin, they might have heard of Ethereum. And what they typically would know is, oh, the Bitcoin price sometimes is really high and sometimes is really low. And, the word scam often comes to mind as well. So the typical level of education for these cryptocurrencies and blockchain technologies, when it comes to the average person, if they haven't spent a lot of time looking into it, they simply don't understand that that's not a problem on their end. It's because it's extremely complicated and complex. It's why there's an entire industry that has popped up around it. Because you almost need a translator to be able to understand pretty much anything that's said if you're not already, on some sort of foundational level in terms of your understanding. If you look at this industry of Web3, you need to understand at least the bare minimum of the technical aspect. You need to understand economics. You need to understand psychology. There's a number of different domains, disciplines that are all merged here. And I think that also geopolitics is another one. So that really makes it very complex for the average person in terms of the amount of time that they can give to this. The ability to raise funds, well, first of all, the ability to create a company in the Web3 industry, because it's such a very, very early stage space. It's very easy to create a company, very easy to get funding, very easy, to act as if you're a trustworthy company while not being one whatsoever. So this, I think, is really where the conversation is centered for us, because on the one hand, there's the fact that companies who are not trustworthy should not be receiving institutional funding from venture capital, although this happens frequently, because it's such a fast moving space, especially in the so-called bull market, which we are not in right now. We are currently in what is called a bear market. So it's very slow moving, but in a bull market, when that's when you see the price of Bitcoin flying sky high. So during those markets, VCs will say yes and send you a bunch of money in a heartbeat because they don't want to lose out on the opportunity. So the due diligence that is done is not as comprehensive as it would be in a bear market, for instance. And so I think that really, if you're talking about investors and really what we focus on, that is where the important differentiation comes in. Is if retail investors are not able to understand fully by themselves based on their limited time, energy, educational resources, then we want to make sure that there's a space where they are able to participate in investments only with companies that we at least know are vetted as much as is possible. And the way this is done is because we have a investor network, an institutional investor network. We only work with projects that we know have been vetted by, many, many other, whether they be partners, whether they be investors, whether they be advisors. So we have a network of different categories of people that we run these projects through. By the time that they get to the retail investor, they have been vetted as much as you can be. And I think this is something that is really important in a space where, you can find the best of people and you can find the worst of people.
People, for some reason, still, although like the people who really believe in the technology, in the blockchain, like it's about decentralizing, like about, not relying on a single source. So they get it. But people who see it as investment, still they need to tie it to a dollar value or whatever fiat currency value. Don't you see, like, this is one of also the main pitfalls, is that still till now, after, I don't know, since the first paper came out, I think it was 2009, if I'm not mistaken, or 2008, still we in our minds, we're still relying on some fiat currency. And actually, we saw also what happened, with the crypto exchanges, like without mentioning names now, and this has added also like some skepticism to people. So the question I want to ask you, and I know you are doing something regarding this with this proof of attention allocation, but how we can fix this, Nadia? Like, well, what's the way? Because we know from as people in tech, people in business, we know that this is not it's cool. It's something that really solve major problems. How we can get the government with us? How we can get the mass people with us? And how you are trying to solve this?
If you look at what we today think of as blockchain technology, yeah, and I mean, crypto falls under blockchain. So everything that we talk about falls under the big umbrella of blockchain technology. Although it's not always the case because now you have Web3. So Web3 is, the let's say the next version of the internet, as it's typically known as. So as Web 1 was very static internet. That's the time when engaging with the internet wasn't nearly as much fun as it is today. I don't know if I even was on the internet back then. Web 2 was the social media internet. So think about Facebook, that era, that's Web 2. And we all know, of course, that Web 2 is dying off, so to speak, because we can see that, I mean, even Threads, Meta released Threads, and there's almost no engagement. The users, there was a mass influx of users, and then since then, pretty much no one visits the site. And this is Meta that can't you know push this Web 2 era into its next phase. So Web 3 is then touted as, okay, this is the future of the internet. Now, Web 3 typically involves blockchain technologies. It has, all sorts of cryptocurrencies, NFTs. The metaverse is also grouped in there. So it's a big, umbrella term for lots of different technologies that are all kind of playing together. I think the thing is that we really need to keep in mind is that differentiation. You said earlier, the people who originally had some sort of vision, and then kind of where is that vision today? So I think it's important to note that it's like divergent paths, right? I think depending on which corner of this industry slash technology you've been involved with, depending on when you entered the space, your understanding and your alignment, even your motivation might be very different. At this point, I don't know if we can say, oh, this future is amazing. At least I don't know if I can. So that's why I said it's incredibly important to always be skeptical, because as much as I am a convert to the promise of what the technology holds, I also see the possibility that it has for abuse. I see, as much as I'm someone who's always believed that it's possible for an industry to exist without regulation, at the same time, I can also very, very painfully recognize where regulation is needed. So I think if you are in any case involved in something like this, that's still so early and is evolving as we speak, um, it's dangerous to take only a particular standpoint in a particular direction. And I've certainly myself been guilty in this of the past, because I think when everyone else is against what you are doing because, they don't understand it or they just don't get it or, whatever you say, it's easy to kind of be pushed to the extreme and then say, yes, but it's going to solve all our problems and it's going to fix everything. But then you certainly get to the point where you realize, look, there's no fix it all for this world. Society is going to, crawl along at the same pace that it was going to, whatever we were going to do or not do. Now with the influx of AI, we see that a lot of changes are coming really, really rapidly. And I don't think it's prudent to say that there's any particular technology that's a solution to anything. So I think it's really good for the Web3 industry to practice a little humility and to realize that as much as it can be a lot of what the future is about.
uh, some of the people who could have the hat of mentors, or if you want, like thought leaders, they didn't do enough
They don't
job, I mean
do
their
enough
job,
job.
to educate the rest. And this is why I know, like, today, Nadia, you do this as a startup mentor. So when someone comes to you, let's say I come to you and they say, hey, I gonna do something in Web3. So what's the first, like, maybe two or three questions you're gonna ask me?
Number one, definitely why Web3. I think this is a sign of the times. And when I say the times, I mean, as I referenced it earlier, the bull market and the bear market. So it's a sign of the bull market when everyone is coming to you wanting to create something in Web3. And the reason is not because Web3 is the best solution for what they are envisioning, but because it's pumping right now. You know, we need to get on board. So I think that certainly is the first question because, again, depending on when this question is asked, if it's asked in the bear market, which we have been in for the past 2 years, it's really funny how when the crypto industry that is very much tied to the financial aspect of it, which is something that, you know, for me, that's not the only thing that there is to it. But I mean, it's impossible to ignore that the market is intricately tied to the financial inflow. That is essentially what the industry, in many ways, are about, as opposed to what the technology is building. And so, in a bear market, if someone is wanting to start a company, not that this is, you know, across the board something that always is the case, but more often than not, it means that they are passionate about what they are building. And you know, it might not be necessarily that they think Web3 is the ultimate best solution, but it might make it easier for them, whether this be funding or whether they think they'll get more traction that way. But they typically are at least excited about the business that they are building, which is something you need to be, right? If you're starting a new company, I mean, I don't think there's anyone, whether you are in business or not, but I don't think there's anyone out there that doesn't think that if you start a company, you should be excited at least in some way about what it is that you're doing. You don't have to necessarily like the every aspect of the idea, but the idea of starting a business should get you excited. Now, I think in a bull market, um, that aspect flies out the window a lot of times. I think what get people excited is the possibility of making a lot of money really quickly. And I'm talking about founders. Of course, investors, retail investors as well. If you talk to a founder, it's first contextually important to kind of check, you know, which market you're in, because that's it. That will say a lot about the intention, and the founder as well. But so definitely why they are choosing Web3, because I think a lot of times it seems like it's an easier thing to do because you see a lot of money going into it, or um, you know, it seems like it's possible to get things done in a way that you won't get them done without these technologies. Um, but it's also important to keep in mind that some things simply shouldn't be tokenized. Like everything shouldn't be tokenized. There's this thinking line of thinking or school of thinking even in this industry where if it moves, you know, tokenize it. Is why someone is doing this at all. Um, I think being a founder, no matter what industry you're in, but I mean, technology, especially because we live in a world where everything is technologically driven. Our perception of what loyalty means has shifted dramatically to the point where, you know, we can hardly recognize it from one generation to the next. So if you're a founder building a product or building a software or, you know, building a token in Web3 or whatever the case may be, um, this is a difficult journey. And again, for a lot of people, because it's the first time that they are building a company, there's a lot of misconceptions with how easy or how difficult it's going to be. And people bring a lot of, you know, traditional thinking that perhaps is not based on their own experience, but what they've heard from others, perhaps even in other industries, or what they've experienced in other industries. Whereas in Web3 specifically, it's a very, very particular space.
What are you trying to solve in the first place? Now, technology, and I had Artem Koren few episodes back, and he said, AI. He was talking about AI, but it can be applied, and actually he mentioned it. It's applying to every single technology. The technology becomes like your vehicle, right? So you just need the vehicle to take you from point A to B, which is from the problem state to the solution state. So I love this approach, and definitely I advise like anyone in the Web3, interested. Maybe they are. I can understand also as well. Like there are enthusiasts, right? So there's an enthusiast who loves AI. There's someone else she loves. I don't know. Maybe still loves Web2. I can understand all this. Or like AR, VR, fine. I understand this, but again, go and try to find why you are doing this in the first place. I really loved, the way you structured and actually destructured it, Nadia. Now,
Yeah, I
something,
just want to add there because I think this
please.
is really important to note is what you're saying about people don't in Web3. I mean, I feel like this, I'm seeing the same in AI, but it's not nearly as pervasive in AI because in AI, we're talking to average people. They are not really AI degens the way that they are Web3 degens, right? So I'm seeing it in AI, but to a much to a much lesser extent, to the point where AI is able to capture those people who don't really know that ChatGPT exists. But in Web3, I wonder how many founders ask themselves the question, what problem am I solving? Because of the amount of Web3 DJs. So a DJin is someone who is kind of, all in on the technology and like they're a true believer. Um, so as I said earlier, if you have to stand fiercely again behind your own beliefs, it's almost like you can't entertain criticism at the same time. You can't practice healthy critical thinking of what you're believing in so much. And I think that's the danger in Web3 is because this is allowed or even encouraged to perpetuate this habit that we don't question ourselves. Who watches the watcher, who questions, the man with the ideas, who critiques the ideas.
They're like institutional entities that they are acting like VCs, private equities, that actually they do it in the maybe cryptos that we know, like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and so on? Or is it like real money that goes there and then, they tokenize this? So this is, maybe first part of the question. And this, when you do the fundraising in a proper way, like in normal startups, and I'm wondering, and I'm asking this also to enlighten the audience, in the normal startup world, like we have the angel round, we have the pre-seed, seed, series A, and ultimately, you have an IPO. Like, do we follow the same step? Or have you seen like companies follow the same route in the Web3?
So in Web3, typically it would, I mean, for a startup, obviously, to get up and running in any way, there needs to be some sort of capital. So typically, if someone has access to friends or family, or they have some of their money that they're able to put in, then there would be an angel round in the same way that we have in the normal startup space. Um, but there's no set rules that are followed. Typically, again, it would be the angel round, and then it would be or pre-seed, and then it would be seed, and then you'd have private. Then there might be what's called a strategic round, and then you ultimately have the public sale. Now, the public sale, as I said earlier, I'll work backwards. The public sale is similar to an IPO, but again, it's not regulated, so it doesn't function in the same way. It does the same rules don't apply. So a public sale, essentially how that happens is because everything is based on tokens. So the price that you buy in will be the most expensive at the public round. So I'll just give some generic numbers just so we can anchor this. So let's say the public sale, you buy each token at 20 cents. Now in the private sale, or let's say in the strategic round, you might have bought the same token for, let's say, 18 cents. In the private round, you would have bought it for, let's say, 12, and in the seed, maybe for 8. That's a huge bargain. So from this example, you can then see that obviously it's much more beneficial to participate in at least the private sale as opposed to the public sale. Now, today, it's a little bit different. We don't really do ICOs anymore as an industry. Whenever you see a project doing an ICO now, it's a red flag more than anything else. It's more, you get the sense that they are trying to capture people who don't know that ICOs are not safe, because it's also a very outdated way of fundraising. So that also means they, don't really talk to people in the industry, which is also concerning, of course. Super important that everyone starts asking, well, if I'm going to invest, I don't want to invest in what you're going to give me tomorrow. I want to invest in what you did yesterday. So yeah, we are hopefully positive changes coming up in the next market.
Maybe one final question, if you can. And I get excited when I get to know. And you mentioned also in your intro about the documentary. I know you might not be able to reveal everything, but on a high level, like what's the future is hiding for us, Nadia? Like, if you can tell us, like, just hints.
Yeah, I mean, I again, a question that I would love to have an answer to. We're definitely creating the future as we speak. But I think what's most fascinating to me about the future is this idea that the concept of our personal identities are shifting so much. I don't know about you. Maybe it's an indication of how big a problem I have. But I mean, I have my phone in my hand every moment of the day, and when I don't, I feel like something really, really precious is missing. And this is not because I particularly love holding my phone or I particularly love using my phone. It's that my identity, not because I necessarily chose. I don't know if I had the 2020 hindsight that I do now, if I would have made the same choices. Perhaps I would have used technology in a more mindful way if I knew kind of how much it would change my perception, my habits. But on the other hand, I think it's almost inevitable. Because most people in the world that use technology are experiencing the same thing, which means that as a species, we are evolving to the point where we cannot exist really without technology. I mean, if there's an apocalypse, we can all exist without anything. But if things go as they are, in a non-apocalyptic way, although maybe it's already going in an apocalyptic way, that's debatable. Um, but so we are so intricately tied to technology that we can't imagine our lives without it. However, it's not the phone that I'm concerned with. It's that my identity has been augmented in some way. Um, that my identity is not only my being, but also in a sense how I am interconnected to others and how I express myself. Now, I mean, these are very almost spiritual concepts if we choose to take it in that way. So I find it very interesting that technology is almost like a tangible expression of what some, like in Buddhism, for example, we can philosophize about these things, but in technology, we show the practical application of it, for better or worse. So I think for me, the most fascinating thing about the future and how technology plays a role in this is it's no longer me plus technology, because it's almost impossible to separate the two. I mean, I certainly cannot imagine having a future without technology. I mean, I don't want one. Technology is not a great force for good at all times. I mean, it makes me lose sleep. It makes me lose focus. It makes me more unproductive sometimes. It distracts me. It evokes all sorts of emotions in me. There's all of that. There's power hierarchies that need to be looked at in society in terms of technology. So there's a lot of not great things, but at the same time, uh, my life is one that where I use technology. And so if I look to the future, what does it mean? Maybe I don't have a phone at all. There's this humane AI pin that just came out. But I think for me, that's the most interesting, is to see, okay, what's that future going to hold? It's not necessarily going to be fantastic. I mean, if you've watched Black Mirror, you can see kind of a lot of these things are things we don't want to happen. And again, we need to be guardians, all of us, every single person that engages with technology needs to be a guardian and go, okay, I need to think about what's happening here. And so, in a very roundabout way, I think that's kind of what the documentary focuses on.
So thank you for all your feedbacks. And as usual, if you're interested also to be on the show, let me know. I can arrange for this. Time zones, geographies doesn't matter. So thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll meet again very soon. Thank you. Bye bye.